The NFL Draft is here, and Ohio State stars are ready to shine.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Buckeye fans, to your Monday edition of Locked On Buckeyes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, veteran sports talk host, delivering passionate coverage about your Buckeyes. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. During today's show, we'll be joined by the college football managing editor over at A to Z Sports. And some of those refer to me by Ryan Roberts, who I've called my favorite NFL draft analyst, but Ryan is unavailable. And Travis May is filling in this week for the draft. The draft is here, and a lot of Buckeye fans are looking forward to seeing lots of names called this week over the 3 days of the NFL draft.
Thanks for having me. Ryan always does great work. He's one of our best NFL draft analysts. He's been doing this forever, connections all around the league. And so it's been great to be able to work with him for this full year that he's been on staff with A to Z and be on site with him at the combine and everything. So just it's a fun process. Can't believe we're actually finally here.
It's hard to believe we're here. A lot of Ohio State fans, we've been sucked into the spring practice and the quarterback competition and other things going on there. But I haven't really touched on a lot of the NFL draft guys recently because it's been Julian Sand or Wiki Holds or guys that are currently on the team at Ohio State. Will Howard, unfortunately, is no longer at Ohio State. His 1 year in Columbus was a fun year to watch. There are some ups. There's a lot of ups. There were some downs. But Will Howard raised his draft stock during his 1 year at Ohio State. How do you view Will Howard as he's preparing to hear his name called in the NFL draft?
Yeah, I think he was always somebody that was intriguing even when he was back at Kansas State because you saw the traits. It was just not the perfect situation. The scheme that didn't always ask him actually to do a whole lot in terms of complexities. However, he didn't have great weapons either. So it kind of offset. Anytime he would do anything impressive, it was like, oh, he just did it playing for Kansas State. And he actually had a pretty good record there even before he came to Ohio State. And even in the pre-draft process, not this past cycle, but the year before when he was still considering entering rather than transferring, he was one of the most highly coveted names trying to go to the Senior Bowl at the time, a year prior to having what was his best season. So I'm pretty excited to see where he goes because I don't see many people having him inside their top 1, 2, 3 slots in this NFL draft. That's a lot of Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart. But I think he's not that far off from some of these guys that are right there in the mix that should go maybe day 2 in the NFL draft. And I think consensus at A to Z Sports is he's probably a fringe day 2 draft pick. I think he probably goes higher than that, could get close to round 2. I think if he goes inside round 2, that's probably a little bit of a surprise for most people. But he always had the arm strength and the build, the ability. And when he finally put it together, putting top 6 or 7 peak pass efficiency numbers together this past season, and then winning a national championship, I think that's okay. When he put it all together in that way, it's hard not to like Will Howard. So I think day 2 draft pick is fair. If he slips into early day 3, that wouldn't be completely surprising. But I think given his traits, his leadership, his progression throughout his career, I think he's still got a higher ceiling than what we've already seen. So some team might take a chance in the 70s, 80s, somewhere like that.
I think that phrase is 2 words, having a higher ceiling, are things that I've grown to use to describe Will Howard. I haven't done it a lot. Like I've mentioned, we haven't touched a lot on the guys that aren't currently on the Buckeyes roster. But I do think Will Howard at the next level is going to have a ceiling that is higher than what people think it currently is right now because of what he did at Ohio State. That showed everybody in the NFL, when you put weapons around him and you allow him to work with guys that are elite on the outside, that are at the top of the talent and the sport, he could be a really good quarterback. And in the NFL, you're surrounded by elite talent all over the place. Now, it's unfortunate. Some situations, O-line is not good. Running back situations isn't ideal. So that does kind of factor into how productive a quarterback is. But if Will Howard goes into a situation that is favorable for him and his skill set, doesn't ask him to be the hero right away, but kind of find his role and fit in there, he could be not only a day 2 pick, but he could find himself as a starter in spot duty in year 1 in the NFL.
Yeah, that would be That would be surprising, but it's all about the right fit, right? I mean, if one of these teams that just needs a quarterback decides to take a chance on him rather than like a Jackson Dart, if Dart kind of falls somewhere
Mhm.
further than expected, just because of the scheme concerns coming out of Ole Miss, that could be his path. Whether that's with the Steelers given all their mess with Aaron Rodgers or the lack thereof, or one of these other situations where there's kind of an unproven aging veteran. I don't want to say unproven, but like a situation where Sam Darnold comes back down to earth, or a situation where Geno Smith bottoms out, or a situation where Russell Wilson looks like Russell Wilson from last year. Like there are paths where he could actually earn some significant snaps in year one for sure.
Do you see him as a career backup at the next level?
I think that's probably the safest bet, but he's one that it's funny how many quarterbacks have actually played I don't know, like 5 to 10 games in that range that get at least one good shot to start. I mean, even like Sam Howell from North Carolina got a pretty good run to an opportunity, and he wasn't even a day two pick. He was one of those guys who had an imperfect finish to his profile, but had he was a little bit shorter, struggled with sacks, kind of like Will Howard in that he doesn't necessarily struggle with any one issue like to the red flag level, but he also doesn't have any one elite trait that sets him apart. He kind of looks like the really solid, trustworthy game manager type that you could plug and play and feel pretty good about it. So I would say that for the most part, he's going to be a backup, but I think there is a path if he does a wow in his early action, a la, Kirk Cousins from
Yeah.
when was that 2013 or 2014 when he was first making his significant starting action. That's the kind of path that if, we're talking 100th percentile outcome, we could see him playing out.
What path do you see for Emeka Ibuka at the next level?
Now he's somebody that I don't understand why more people don't have him in the conversation to be wide receiver one in this class. Yes, he was more like a wide receiver two on his own team for most of his career at Ohio State, but that's because he was sharing targets with Marvin Harrison Jr. That's because he was sharing targets with Jeremiah Smith, who both are going to be top 10 picks. Like, I mean, there's an argument that Jeremiah Smith just might be the first overall pick in the 2027 NFL draft when he comes out. And so when you're sharing targets with talents like that, no, you're not going to put up bonkers numbers like we've seen a couple other players do. Even like in this same class, Tet McMillan, T-Mac, putting up over 40% of the offense there and the efficiency because they're just launching it downfield, taking advantage of his frame. Like he's just not been in that situation where he could capitalize. But if he's in almost any other offense where he can be an alpha, he does. I'm confident that we're talking about him going much earlier if he wasn't playing second fiddle so often at Ohio State. He can do anything you want. He's got the ball skills to win at the point of attack if he is in a contested situation, but he's not that often because he's always open. That's just that should be his nickname. But I think he plugs in and produces right away in the slot, or just operates as a Z/move kind of do everything wide receiver because there's literally nothing that he's bad at. And people forget he was a 5-star wide receiver. Like this isn't just some scrub who kind of climbed the depth chart. No, he was a 5-star guy. We've known he was good for like 6 years now. Like and he just verified it every step of the way and dating back to when he was a sophomore. When you compare him to all other sophomores, not just all the wide receivers in the country, there was only one wide receiver who put together a more impressive sophomore season back in, I guess it was 2022, when Marvin Harrison Jr. was still there. And the only one who put together a more impressive, meaningful metric season, like yards per route run, market share numbers, yards per team pass attempts, a bunch of metrics that predict future NFL success. The only one who had better numbers than him was his own teammate, Marvin Harrison Jr., compared to all other sophomore wide receivers in the country. So, yes, he struggled with health a little bit in 2023. This year, he bounced back and wowed, even though he was overshadowed by the hype of Jeremiah Smith being, this freshman phenom. But he's every bit the first-round prospect that people need to respect more than they are right now.
Travis and I are just touching the surface on numerous Buckeyes that will be drafted over the course of 3 days in the NFL draft. Howard's checked off. We're in the midst of Ibuka. We're going to continue with the conversation about number 2 next. This episode is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is a reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. I'm liking what you say about Emeka Egbuka and being surprised he's not wide receiver one, because I talked to someone in the season before, I think it was an Oregon game, and they said they didn't understand the hype around Ibuka. They don't know why he was projected to be a first-round pick. And I'm sitting here in my head thinking, if you look at the numbers and just look at Ohio State during his time there, 2021 wasn't Jacob's monster year. Harrison Jr. for a couple years, and then Jeremiah Smith. At no time was he ever the number one receiver, but he walks away with the most receptions in school history. And so most guys that are number two, they don't walk away with that accomplishment at the end of the day. And you can just look at that accomplishment and say, okay, like, this guy has something good about him. We're not sure what it is or why he was never the first wide receiver, but he has something good about him. Why do you think that is the narrative right now when the film screams wide receiver one, but the narrative doesn't match up what we see on the film?
I think it goes back to the fact that he spent most of his time in the slot. And for some reason, we can't get it out of our heads that slot wide receivers can also just be elite wide receiver ones. I think back to the year where Justin Jefferson came out, and a lot of people were talking about how many reps he was facing off coverage, how often he was in the slot. How does he project as a true wide receiver one in the NFL? And that was just like 3 or 4 years ago. And now he's on pace to what? Be the most productive wide receiver in NFL history. And so I look at somebody like Ibuka, who wins in all kinds of ways and is the consistent go-to option, no matter who the quarterback is. And I say, look, he just is always open. He's always available. He's consistent when he's healthy. And I see a player that, despite he doesn't have the 4.29 speed that a Matthew Golden has, or a 4.21 speed like Xavier Worthy from a year ago, but that's not necessarily what wins. You look at the fastest 40 times ever at the NFL Combine, and you see a bunch of guys who completely failed to hit 1,000 yards in their entire NFL career. I believe there's only one wide receiver who had a sub 4.3 40-yard dash time, whoever eclipsed 1,000 yards one time in the NFL. There's guys that have been pretty close, but straight line speed is overrated, and he has plenty of it anyway. So if we're worried about athleticism or whatever it is with him, or him being a slot only, that's just overlooking the balanced skill set that Emeka Egbuka brings, and the hype that, again, he should have more of.
Let's stay on the offensive side of the ball, going from one guy who has an opportunity to be a first-round pick to a guy who seems like he's a surefire first-round pick, and Josh Simmons. He's one of the guys that was invited to be at the NFL draft there in the green room, which is a very exclusive group. And I think at one point they had 30 or 32 guys that were invited to the green room. I think I saw the list was like 15 or 17. They kind of shortened it, and I'm not surprised they did that. But when Simmons went down in the middle of the season, the Buckeyes offensive line took a massive hit, and I assumed his draft stock would do the same thing. It didn't. It stayed where it was and maybe even went up because you saw the value of Josh Simmons there at left tackle. How do you view him heading into the NFL draft?
Oof. I would say it's tough to say that he's not in the mix to be offensive tackle one in the class. I know that there's a lot of people like Will Campbell as a true left tackle. A lot of people like the balance of the profile of an Armand Membu of Missouri. A lot of people like Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas. But a couple of these guys have kind of shorter arms that don't necessarily measure up to typical tackle measurements. And you look at a guy with the body type of Josh Simmons, and I don't know how close you've ever stood next to Josh Simmons, but like that dude is freaking built. And so yes, he kind of has imperfect arm length himself. It's not like the 34, 35, but he's a 6 foot, 6'5", 320-pound plus monster of a man. And so I'm not really worried about his kind of measurements like I am with a couple of these other tackles in this class. And yes, his season was cut short, but before it was cut short, he was on pace to basically post a perfect season. And had he done so, had he stayed healthy, I think we're talking about him as a top 5 pick. I think we're talking about him as, all this buzz, Will Campbell to the Patriots this week. We're probably talking about Josh Simmons to the Patriots this week. But that's not the case. He's not been healthy. He's still recovering. And I think that's why there's still questions. But even dating back to his time when he was at San Diego State, he showed the upside and ability to just dominate with physicality and faster feet than a guy his size should have. And so, is he perfect? I don't think this class has any perfect offensive tackle profile, but I think he's every bit deserving of first round capital, even with the injury concerns. I know that he was kind of peaking up near the top 10 at his highest point of projection. Now he's kind of more in the teens, into the 20s. If a team lets him, like let's say the Houston Texans lets him drop below that point of the draft, I think that's pick 25. That's a mistake. That's overlooking the upside that comes with Josh Simmons.
Let's stay on the offensive line for one more guy before going to the Buckeyes defense. Donovan Jackson he's one of those players that I was getting kind of down on heading into the year because the 2023 film wasn't as good as I thought it could have been. But then 2024, he plays guard, plays really good at guard, bumps out to left tackle for the first time in his career. And it's almost an eye-opening moment for a lot of us realizing he's more athletic than I think a lot of us gave him credit for. And he quickly realized what it took to play left tackle, how to play left tackle, and adjusted on the fly to different guys he was going up against week after week after week. How do you think that him playing left tackle in the season is impacting his draft stock right now?
I think even a year before, he was projected to be a day 2 pick. The consensus was, somewhere in the 50s, 60s, in that range. And again, we saw that happen coming into this draft season. Maybe Donovan Jackson goes in the 50s, 60s, somewhere in that range. Like middle of last fall, he switches to left tackle. And actually, after that Penn State game, the vibes were not great because he gave up a couple really bad sacks. However, after that game, he gave up exactly 0 sacks for the rest of the entire season that were actually attributed to him. And so when I look at a player like him that has the versatility to dominate inside, but then kick outside whenever I need him to, I say I'm going to take a chance on him. And we've seen his stock rise once he kind of really did really well at the combine with the interviews, and I had the opportunity to talk to him. Just a really impressive guy. And a lot of teams are clearly interested in plugging him into the guard spot and the tackle spot. He was talking about that positional flexibility, and every single team talking to him about that. And since he got more experience since that midpoint of last year, he rose from maybe in the 50s and 60s in mock draft data to like, hey, as of today, he's going inside the first round in every one out of like 6 mock drafts over the last 2 or 3 weeks. So you look at that and go, okay, this player has real upside. I could see him going to somewhere like the Commanders that need all kinds of offensive line help at the end of round 1, somewhere like that. That could probably be about his ceiling in this draft now. But I feel really good about taking him in the early second.
Let's go to the defense, and after the break, we're going to dive into a couple guys that were multi-year starters for Ohio State that will be drafted in the NFL draft. I'm not sure where they'll be drafted. We'll discuss all that after the break. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and the last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. One of the best things that Game Time provides is the ability to get last-minute deals, and it helps you save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater near you. The all-in pricing means no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We touched on a lot of guys on the Buckeyes offense, from Howard to Egbuka to Simmons to Jackson, but none of them have the ability to say they were a 4-year starter at Ohio State like Denzel Burke. Burke was a guy who unexpectedly started his first game in the Buckeye uniform and then was started the rest of the way unless he was hurt throughout his career. Really good corner, solid corner. Got some bad film against Oregon, but bounced back. I don't think that film is going to really hurt him. It's just, oh, we had a bad day. Everybody has a bad day. I've had them. You've had them. We've all had bad days. And that one bad day, I don't believe will define Denzel Burke as teams are trying to draft him. What do you like about him as a player?
I think he kind of looked like the prototypical outside wide receiver, not wide receiver, cornerback very early on when he, like you said, at Ohio State. And I think for, I don't know, a few years in a row, I'm somebody who plays in, by the way, the nerdiest fantasy football leagues of all time, that like the college fantasy stuff and best ball, where you start all kinds of defensive players. So I'm looking at Denzel Burke like back in 2021, like, oh yeah, this guy's going to be a shutdown corner, and early on he's going to get peppered with targets, so he's going to get all these tackles. And so I'm like drafting him ahead of time, like a couple years ago, thinking he's going to come out of the draft, and it's funny because like he was a first round pick lock for a long time prior to even the 2024 cycle, I guess. But he came back, and I think it actually kind of hurt his stock because he had the low moments this past year, and he went from being a fringe first round selection, at worst case we're talking about a round 2 guy, to man, like now, given this cornerback class and how good and deep it is this year, we're talking about a player who might not even go inside round 3.
Yeah.
I hope that's not the case. But given the ups and downs that we saw, the flat out just kind of missed assignments, it seemed. It's one thing to just get beat, but whether it be the Oregon game or trying to think just a couple, just maybe it was because it was Purdue. Purdue's my alma mater. He was just out of place a couple times even against Purdue. And so like when you're out of place against teams that you shouldn't be out of place on, and you're kind of giving up silly plays, and I have questions with that kind of player. And so I don't know him personally. I didn't get to. He's one of the few I didn't get to talk to at the NFL Combine this year. But the inconsistencies were a little bit maddening this past year. So if he tightens it up and looks more like 2023 Denzel Burke, I think his ceiling is kind of first round caliber play. Every other week he kind of shows that. Whether it's trying to think back to a couple of his really good games this past year. I want to say Nebraska, he was kind of more locked down, but. And it's funny, like that came right after his really bad Oregon game too, I believe. So it's just the up and down nature probably frustrates teams. I'm sure that in all the interviews he's had this spring, it's been like, okay, what happened here? Like, what got you out of place here? Like, why were you just looking like your footwork was bad to get you in this situation here? And so, while he has every bit of the upside to be an elite outside corner, the inconsistencies might drop him into round 3 or even early round 4.
That's tough to hear. I've been trying my best not to buy into the reality, because I don't like to do that about some players, and I liked Burke a lot. I've never been able to figure out what some of the inconsistencies what were caused by. Maybe they were mental, which I think a lot of it was mental. Maybe there were some physical injuries that he was dealing with that weren't talked about a lot. Do you think a guy that's had some of those missed assignments and some of those mental blunders in his final year in college, do you think that'll hurt him once continue? Excuse me. Do you think that will continue in the NFL?
I think it's hard to say it's going to get easier for him.
Yeah.
And so maybe he works through some things and just irons out a few issues with the right coaching, even this spring. Like once, and sometimes that happens with these guys who have the traits, they put it all together because they finally get to be a professional rather than having to play school at all. They can just play football and focus on getting their body to the professional standpoint and getting their preparation to a professional standpoint. And so part of what we loved about Denzel Burke, I'm trying to think back to the games in particular, but like when he was defending all those passes, even as like a true freshman, and like even in 2023, where he was it looked like he was anticipating more. I don't know why that changed, but he clearly has the instincts. So if maybe it's just overthinking, if you can get over that, he can go back to being the good potential first round talent that we saw. I think there's a really good chance that he is an underrated asset, especially if he drops into early day 3, because the peaks of what we've seen, which is a lot of times like what the draft is, what the league is drafting for, are still really tantalizing.
One guy in his final year at Ohio State, in Cody Simo, that was really, really good as a Buckeye linebacker. Was a multi-year starter, a guy that kind of turned back the clock for Buckeye fans, that kind of played the type of linebacker play that Ohio State fans had been wanting to see. Tommy Eichenberg was good, don't get me wrong, but Cody Simo was better last year. What did he do for his draft stock in his final year at Ohio State?
I think it was huge because I mean, for one, he played not just a starter role, but near kind of an every down role. Ohio State fans have been familiar with him for a long time because, like Burke, he kind of burst onto the scene with significant action way back in 2021. But I don't think that was his first year. His first year was 2020, and I'm pretty sure he redshirted that year. He's been around a minute, and he was one who, as his role kind of changed and other athletic talents kind of ate into his snap count, he could have, in today's day and age, just been like, nah, I'm going to peace out and go somewhere else and get more playing time. But instead, he went old school on us, and he stuck around till year 5 and was rewarded for it. And his leadership, I think, stood out when I talked to other people this spring about him, other Ohio State players. Is he going to be like this game-breaking, every single down athlete at linebacker in the NFL? I don't think so, but I think he certainly has a role at off-ball linebacker to where he could really stick on an NFL roster. And so when he put it together, was one of the more consistent tacklers in the country, and that shows up in the numbers, like 100 tackles, over 100 tackles this past year. So I mean, the numbers were kind of through the roof compared to any other season for him. So huge impact year. And I think not only what he did to sell his talents to the Ohio State fan base, I think it wasn't just that, but I think it was his teammates. And because of that, other NFL teams and other NFL executives are going to be even more impressed with a player who a year ago would have certainly gone undrafted had he chosen to enter the NFL. And he could have entered into the NFL coming off of what was a really good season already for him. It was just, not what it was last year. So really love to see a guy actually finally stick around for 5 years rather than just abandoning his teammates for a payout. So that we see that way too much in today's game. And he added a layer to his game this year too, and getting a bunch of sacks too. So he proved that he kind of does everything well. And so I don't, the people that I talk to, whether it be at Shrine, Senior Bowl, Combine, any part of the process, they don't think that Simon's one that really stands out that's going to go in the early rounds. He's probably a 5th, 6th, 7th round pick, but he's 100% going to be drafted this year, which is great to hear for a player of his caliber and his commitment to Ohio State.
Last question here for you. Probably got about 45, 60 seconds left. Will Quinshon Judkins be a day 2 pick?
I think so. I think that we get prospect fatigue with some of these guys, right? And so I think we see even like the top wide receivers like Ibuka, Burden, and McMillan, all three like inexplicably dropping down mock draft boards, and like, oh, he might go later than you think. It's like we stared at these players so long, like they're good for so long that we think, oh, well, he's not going to go very early in the NFL draft now. For what reason? I don't know. But like the truth is, he's been good since day one when he was back at Ole Miss. I still remember, just because I follow recruiting like crazy. Like there's this old picture of Lane Kiffin like sitting in the freezing rain watching this running back play, and it was like a meme for a little bit. And the player that he was watching was in the freezing rain to make sure he had the eyes right was Quinshon Judkins. He's that kind of special talent that he was overlooked even in the recruiting process. He wasn't a 5-star. He was kind of like a high 3, maybe fringe 4-star talent. He wasn't supposed to be this guy, but he was. Every step of the way, he was that guy. He intentionally went to Ohio State to kind of keep his some tread on his tires and share the workload with a really talented teammate in Trevion Henderson. And it's been funny to hear them kind of go back and forth throughout this draft process about their camaraderie and wanting to go before each other in the draft. And I think the projections are that Trevion Henderson's going to go earlier, and he might even go first round when it's all said and done. But I think Quinshon Judkins is right there in that mix, and it would be really strange if he wasn't even like a round 2 player. And so I know in the last week or so, there's been some buzz that because of how deep this running back class is, he might not even go day 2. I think that's a lock for me. He's definitely day 2. It's going to be tough to go round 1 in this class. But I think that day 2 is the sweet spot. Round 2 makes sense for a talent like his.
I really appreciate Travis May coming on the show. He is a college football managing editor over at A to Z Sports. I'm also via the recommendation of Ryan Roberts, who, like I said earlier, is my favorite NFL draft analyst, does good work with A to Z Sports, and he's been helping us out every draft cycle for, my goodness, 3 or 4 years now. You can follow him, Travis, that is, on Twitter at FF_TravisN. You can follow me on the same platform at JSteven07. This has been Locked on Buckeyes here on a Monday. We'll see you next time.